Welcome back to our campus, Katie Stanton, who has not been here since, I think, she graduated.
That's right, since 1995.
Since 1995, so it's wonderful to have her back. She is a leader in the technology sector, having really, after leaving here, eventually finding her way to Twitter, really drove the internationalization of Twitter, and is now involved in an extraordinary startup. So I think but not an absolute startup, actually already having impact in its area, so an early stage company. So what I thought we'd do is just invite Katie to share with us her story. Tell us how she came out of SIPA with obviously a background and interest in international matters, but tell us how you left here, what your mindset was, and what led you to Twitter.
Sure.
And thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you for having me. It's great to be back, and it's great to see that the elevators are still pretty bad, so not much has changed. But SIPA was amazing for me. I came here with a relatively narrow view of what I thought I wanted in my career. I thought, okay, I want to be the CEO of the Red Cross. I want to be the ambassador to France, or maybe I will, be the Secretary General of the United Nations. Those were sort of the three options that I had in my head. And so I came here and I took a bunch of classes, and then all of a sudden my world kind of opened quite considerably. I met my best friends of still today, and I took some classes at the business school, and I thought, there are a lot of other opportunities out there. So let me just kind of continue to invest in education, and I was at EPD concentration, and when I left SIPA, I was a Javits Fellow. Which meant that I was able to work in DC. I worked for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And at that time, Senator Jesse Helms was a chair. And not to go too much into that, but it wasn't the best experience at the time. And so I thought, well, forget government. Maybe that's not the path for me. And so much of a career, I think, is trial and error. You try things, and you're like, it doesn't feel right. And then I worked at a nonprofit for a while, and I was like, I'm not sure this is right for me either at that particular time. And so, I was like, okay. Tried nonprofit, I tried government, I might as well get some private sector experience, because one thing I did notice when I was in government, that everyone seemed to listen to the men and women who had worked on Wall Street or who had worked in consulting. I thought, well, there's a reason why they're listening. Let me develop those skills. So I was pretty uncreative, and I was like, I'll go into banking. That'll solve everything. And so I went into banking. I was an analyst and associate here in Manhattan at Chase, and it was a great experience. I learned a ton. And I remember going on, taking a flight to a coal mine. And I sat next to a woman on the plane, and she was like, what do you do? Where are you going? And I said, I'm going to Tennessee. We're looking at investing in this coal mine. And as the words were kind of coming out of my mouth, I was like, wait a second. I'm off my path. This isn't why I went to SIPA. This isn't what I thought I wanted to do. So then I had sort of a reality check with myself. Whatever I do, I want it to be international. I want it to have the properties of something that's international, something that's creative, something that does something positive in the world, and something I can be really proud of. So I remember going back to the trading floor, and I was doing a search, and at that time, this is going to really date myself, I remember searching on this portal called Yahoo. I thought to myself, Yahoo, wouldn't that be so cool to work at a company called Yahoo? And so I found a friend of a friend of a friend who knew somebody, and went out to California. It was funny. I was like, I'm going to be out in California next Monday. I'd love to meet. And they were like, sure, come on in. And quickly booked a ticket to California and talked to them about finance and how they needed to really invest in this Yahoo Finance product and really expand it internationally. And they were like, yeah, sure. And so they hired me, and I couldn't believe it. I remember quitting Chase on the spot when they called me. I didn't even ask what the salary was. I didn't ask about stock options. I didn't get it. Never do that. Always negotiate. Always know what you're getting into. And that kind of became my path. And so I learned that there was this whole new world developing in California and now everywhere in terms of building these internet sites, companies that can help connect people with customers around the world, that were creating great value, something that was international, something that's something I could be really proud of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that took you to Yahoo. That's amazing. And then, of course, Yahoo has gone through quite a lot. But you ended up going to Twitter not long afterwards. Is that right?
That's right. I think what Yahoo taught me is that you can actually love your job. I was sure when people said they loved their job that they were lying. It's like, it's not possible. And when I went to Yahoo, the people were great, the product was interesting. I loved the international part of it, being able to develop Yahoo around the world. And I was there for about 3 years, and then I very quickly had 3 children within 18 months, which is also not recommended. It was very hard. I had twins plus 1, and thought, I'll take a year off. So as I was thinking about going back to work, I thought, well, what could possibly be better than Yahoo? And there was a company growing called Google. I thought, well, that sounds great. I'll go to Google. And so I interviewed at Google, worked at Google for about 6 years, and I had a lot of different roles. I worked on the sales team, I worked on the product team, I worked in the business development team, and towards the end part of my Google career, it was 2008, and I was volunteering on the Obama campaign, and I was starting to think about what was next. And there was this early company starting called Twitter, and I knew the founder because he had also worked at Google, and he had offered me this role, and I was like, this is really cool, but really interested in where this election thing is going. And President Obama won the election, of course, and his team had reached out and said, by the way, would you be interested in joining the administration, helping us with technology? I was like, fork in the road. Yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, follow this man, this presidency, this administration. This is, what a great time. It's a front row seat in history. And so decided to join the administration. So I moved out to DC and spent a year working for President Obama, which was amazing. It was very challenging in the government coming from tech. Google to technology was, Google to the White House was very, very different at the time. And then, which was interesting and maybe relevant for this conversation, after a year in the White House, I got a call from Secretary Clinton's team asking if I'd like to join the State Department. I thought, this is where I connect the dots. And finally, I'm at the State Department, and this is what I thought I would do at SIPA, and now I'm going to do something that's really, relevant to, what I studied here. And it was really fascinating, but I realized at that point that I really loved the private sector, I really loved technology, and I really loved building companies, and I loved applying it back into government. But I was after 2 years in government, I thought, you know what, I'm ready to go back to California. So then I called back the Twitter guys, like, by any chance, could I still have that job? And they said, sure, come on out. It's great timing because we need somebody to develop Twitter internationally. The company was growing, the business was growing. They had no revenue outside the US, they had no employees outside the US, but there was a lot of content outside the US, and could I help shape that? I was like, what a dream job. So I joined Twitter, and it was a dream job. It was amazing. The first thing was, help us prioritize the markets, which markets matter and in what order. And that's where I felt like I could really leverage a lot of the stuff that I learned here at SIPA, understanding the macroeconomics of each country, looking at the online ad markets of each country, looking at the geopolitical issues of each country. Should we invest in China, which is obviously a big market? Are we willing to censor our content? No. So we kind of went back and forth, had a debate, and then gradually built Twitter from Japan to the UK to Ireland to France to Germany to Dubai and Brazil and India, and it was just really a dream job and a dream opportunity. Mm-hmm. It was a very long answer, I apologize.
No, it's an extremely interesting answer. So you're not working at Twitter now, so I don't want you to feel in any way that you need to answer this completely informed by their current exact thinking. But in general terms, as you think about the value proposition of Twitter, what is that? How do you think about that?
I think Twitter remains maybe one of the most important platforms in the world. I still believe it is a platform of freedom of expression, for better or for worse. And it is the only platform of its kind that allows these asymmetrical relationships, meaning that I, as kind of an everyday person, I can follow Ellen DeGeneres to Barack Obama to Newsweek to SIPA and all these different places and people that don't necessarily have to know me. And so I can learn about all this information in real time. It kind of democratizes information. We all have equal access, equal opportunity to listen and also to express ourselves. So I think it remains very important. It's imperfect, as most technologies are. Technology can be used for good and for bad. And I think it's very difficult for companies and leaders to be able to, sometimes have all the content that they want. And especially if you have something, I think Twitter still sees about 500 million tweets a day, which is impossible to police. And so leveraging technologies like AI to understand, like, okay, this is really bad content, and this violates our terms of service, and here are the things that we need to do to regulate it. Or when you see things that you don't like, why do you take that down but not other things? So it's very, very challenging, but I believe in the leadership team. I think they have some really smart people, many of whom have policy degrees and backgrounds.
Uh-huh. So do you I feel like this is one of those huge questions now that have erupted in the United States and around the world, is the regulatory climate and approaches that we might design to deal with these platform companies. And could you say a little bit more how you think, I mean, in a sense, I mean, I come at this, from an antitrust or trade perspective, and we gave companies some immunities in the early days to help them get started, third-party liability, immunity, other kinds of immunities, and that was seen as, and we have an environment in the US that has allowed early-stage companies to get capital. So these are big advantages of the US system, right, that seemed important for their growth. As you think about, what's allowed Twitter and others to thrive in the US, what do you think of as being important?
I think a lot of companies that I've seen that have thrived have very similar properties. So access to capital, to your point, that there is a growing venture capital community and people that are investing in companies that they see sort of kernels of opportunity and problem solving. So access to capital is one. The second might be access to mentorship. That it's very meritocratic and there's a very supportive relationship and ecosystem that I've seen. I don't know if you've heard of this sort of PayPal mafia. So some of the early founders and early employers of PayPal, they've gone on to invest in the next companies. The same is true with Yahoo, with Google, with Amazon, and they sort of like reinvest and rebuild different types of companies. The company I'm at now, a company called Color, it was started by two guys that I had worked with at Twitter and at Google, and this is their fourth or fifth company that they've started. So people get to know each other, they know where to ask for money, they know where to ask for early employees and skill sets, and trying to build these ideas and try to scale them as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One more question about Twitter, but also about data. I mean, now Twitter feed is being used as a basis for a lot of other businesses, right? Data analytics companies, macro investors downtown. It's kind of a core input it's producing its own other entrepreneurship. Did you envision that to be the case when this was growing in the early stage?
I didn't.
No.
I wish I did, but others did, and I think that's, you're right. I mean, it's one of the unique properties about Twitter. So reasonably early on, we created the Twitter API that allowed anybody to use this data for whatever they wanted. We thought this was such a rich data set. So we saw hedge funds using this, trying to get a signal about new companies or maybe new information.
Right.
We saw health policy analysts look at this to see if they could track where the flu originated and where this might be populating. And you would see this, across lots of different applications. We saw this with refugees. One of my favorite stories from Twitter was a guy, Ryan Boyette in the Nuba Mountains, and he ended up sending us this video of him in a satellite phone and Twitter documenting the bombings of the Sudanese government of Sudanese refugees. And it was just really interesting, again, from a SIPA perspective and looking at these geopolitical use cases. And so that sort of openness to data is really fascinating. It's huge. We see this at Color. So one of the things that we're doing, so Color, if you don't know, it's a health service that helps people understand the risk of common hereditary conditions like cancer, cardiovascular disease. We offer pretty affordable DNA testing, looking for some of those markers that may lead to cancer and cardio issues. And we send this data with our users' permission that is de-identified and anonymized to these open databases to help researchers better understand how prevalent certain mutations are and what are the things as a population we can do to both find cures for cancer and cardio faster, but also how to prevent them from happening in the first place. So you see these open data sets, whether it's with DNA, whether it's with tweets, whether it's with Facebook data as well, that are really interesting. But again, with these open data sets comes really big responsibilities. First and foremost, protect the user, protect the customer, protect their identity, protect their security, making sure that there are clear guardrails around that data to make sure that this information is used for good and not for harm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you feel you have a handle on that? Do you feel like one of the things is we have people on campus who feel like they can crack any puzzle of that sort. You can't de-anonymize, you can't anonymize enough so that, a smart third party could, get to the answer of where this, that originates. How do you feel about that?
At Color, we take it super seriously. I believe in our engineers and our systems and the work that they've gone through to protect customers and all the different steps. So, I can't speak for every company, obviously, and problems can occur. But I think, if you have the right talent and the right team and the right ethics, then, good things can happen. But it's something that you have to make a priority. It's not something that you just say, like, we're just going to have this privacy page and we'll get to it later. Like, it has to be baked into the early foundations of any company and product.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the transition in your thinking that led you from Twitter to Color, and what you feel that, this sounds like amazing work and very different. I'd like to take you down that road a little bit more, but could you lead us to the transition from Twitter to Color?
Sure. I think throughout my career, I've learned that really 4 things matter. And they've become sort of my 4 core values of choosing a job. So the first is people. Surround yourself with the most excellent people that you can learn from, that bring out your best, that you believe in, that you want to spend your time around. I learned that at SIPA. My core posse at SIPA were the best people possible. We've learned from each other, we challenged each other, and we respected each other. The second principle is around product. It's something that, what is this thing? What are you creating? What are you building that is so important? What good can it do in the world? Is this something that really matters? The third principle is pride. As a parent and of 3 kids, I wanted to be proud of what I would do. That time away from my kids was pretty precious. And to my earlier point, I never ever wanted to sit on a plane and have someone ask me what I did and be mortified. So it was really important to be really proud of what I would do. And then the fourth was impact. Is this an opportunity where I felt that I could make a positive impact? And so as I was considering roles after Twitter, and I thought, wow, I've had this amazing job at Twitter. There's no way that anything could possibly be better. I peaked, and I didn't know really what else was out there. But I found myself really relying on those 4 core values. And I was an investor in the company. I had known the founders for a long time, and they had approached me and said, would you consider being the CMO? And I paused for a minute and told them, okay, you guys are the smartest people I know, but this is probably the dumbest idea that I've ever heard, because I don't have a background in healthcare, I don't have a background in genomics, and I don't have a traditional background in marketing. And they're like, you'll figure it out, just like we figured problems out before. And I think it's one of those things that tends to get undervalued, I think, at institutions, but it's something I felt here that, that they are looking for, and I look for today as I hire people who are critical thinkers, people who love challenges, people who are curious, and people who are persistent and really persistent about solving a problem that matters. And so, so they give me the confidence, and my learning curve is like this every day. I feel like I'm Google searching 30% of every single meeting when one of the geneticists is talking about a certain type of marker. I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. So we're constantly learning, but I'm teaching them too. And so I can share my background from things that I've learned along the way at Twitter and Google that they don't know from a tech point of view.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that's happening in our SIPA community is maybe different from when you were here, is that students are trying to take their policy passions out into the world in many different ways. Of course, some are going into financial institutions or governments or large institutions, but some are also doing early stage companies are trying to find ways of building their passions with technology and data in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would be your advice to people in their mid-20s or somewhere early stage of their career in light of the policy passion that may have brought them here and a desire to impact, but the changing tech policy world?
Yeah, if I could talk to Katie at SIPA in 1993,
Yeah.
I would say get way better at foreign languages. While I passed my French exam, I'm now on the board of a French company, and my French is not good enough. And so get way better at languages. The second, Harpreet was here and teaching computer science, and I wish I had taken more Harpreet classes. I wish I had taken more computer science classes, and I still think that those matter. The third thing, I would get really, really good at something you just love. If you love what you do, you're going to be great at it. So whether it's marketing, whether it's finance, whether it's economics, if it's health, doesn't matter. But get really, really good at something that you care deeply about, because that's what's going to help you get that first, second, or third job right out of grad school. And then be your best self-marketer. Be your own chief marketing officer. And it doesn't mean you have to be a jerk and loud about things, but like making sure that you have a good public profile. That your Twitter feed shows that you have conviction, that you have a point of view, that you might be a thought leader. Your LinkedIn is pretty well done. You're challenging yourself, that you're taking internships, you're networking, you're trying to build that community, because nobody's going to market you. You have to market yourself. So that's going to be really, really important in building your own personal profile.
Thank you. Let me ask you a couple more questions, then I'm going to open it up, so please, friends in the room, think of what's top of mind for you. One could look at the companies you've been part of, the organizations, and most of them are known for fostering a unique form of innovation, being innovative environments. It's a term that's overused these days, but nonetheless extremely important. How would you think about the innovation environments that you've been exposed to? And obviously, you were brought into government because government itself is trying to both use technology and remain nimble.
Yeah, as I think about every place I've worked, they've always tried to solve a hard problem. And so even going back to Yahoo, it was about how do you democratize financial information? And when I was a banker, if you had a Bloomberg terminal, you were gold. You had all the information you needed, right? You had a real-time news feed. You had real-time stock prices. And when went to Yahoo, I was like, okay, I know what investors want. I know what bankers are looking for, but this information is really hard to find. So we can innovate by solving this problem of lack of access to information. And the same held true at Google. How do you simplify? How do you give more access to information, whether it's books or news or search or images? So bringing that innovation to light. Same with Twitter. How do you give everybody, how do you innovate conversations? How do you innovate access to information in real time? And creating those sort of asymmetrical relationships. And at Color, it's about innovate and democratizing access to your DNA. It used 10 years ago cost millions of dollars to be able to sequence your DNA. At Color, we can do it for $99, looking at a couple of genes. Bless you. And so these innovations on their own may not necessarily be important, but if they're towards a greater good. So, for example, at Color, it's around how do we improve healthcare? Our healthcare system is broken. We spend 97% of our healthcare budget in the United States on treating problems after they've occurred. That's broken. We spend about, I think, out of all developed countries, we spend the most per capita, yet we have the worst outcomes. And so our thesis at Color is that if we can innovate by offering people low-cost, affordable genetic testing so they understand the risk, they'll be able to get the healthcare and personalized treatment that they need before it's too late, that will result in better health outcomes and lower costs. So I think these are sort of just examples of how we think about innovation, about distribution and scale and ease and simplicity and access.
Mm-hmm. So in the case of Color, this genetic testing is a screening device that you want to popularize.
Yes.
And so that citizens will be more informed and can make the subsequent choices that they need to make, and then the data is usable by researchers. Have I understood that properly?
Yeah, so it's win-win-win. So as a customer, if you get your DNA sequenced and you find that you may have a marker mutation for, say, BRCA1 or 2, which will mean that your risk of developing breast cancer or ovarian or prostate cancer in your lifetime will increase. So for BRCA1, your risk of breast cancer goes from 12% to 81%. So that means you get earlier mammograms. You don't wait till you're 40. You get more frequent MRIs. You also share this with your family, because if you carry this mutation, there's a 50% chance that your parents, your siblings, and your children will also carry this mutation. And so it's great for you because it helps you understand and personalize your healthcare plan. It's great for your doctor because your doctor knows what to look for and help you with that plan. It's great for researchers because they have more data to work with. And if you think about it, we have 7 billion plus people on the planet, and only several million people have had their DNA sequenced. And most of that is to look at ancestry. So, okay, I'm Swedish, Irish, German, Ghanaian, whatever it may be. And that's interesting, but it's not necessarily useful to you. It doesn't really change the future of your health. So that's how we think about it, that we want to help individuals, families, doctors, and also researchers to improve healthcare generally.
So how do you think about reaching low-income populations and developing countries?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. So we actually have a program called Color for All, where we offer either free or low-cost genetic testing for people who can't afford it. So we partner with a number of universities. We don't, and hospitals. I don't think we partner with Columbia yet. So if anyone has an in, please let me know. But we partner with Morehouse in Atlanta and University of Chicago and Stanford, UCSF, to offer free genetic testing. Internationally, it's interesting. We're available in 150 countries, and here's where the SIPA background comes in handy, because some countries have different rules and regulations and policies about where you can sell and where you can't. But there are a few that have been really interested in doing population testing to understand sort of the risk of their nation, but also to better localize a healthcare opportunity. So for example, there's one researcher, this one woman, she's at Yale, and she's a medical student. She's from Trinidad and Tobago. And she had a thesis that just anecdotally, she felt like there were a lot of cancer cases in her home country. And she had found color and worked with us to get color tests for a chunk of the population. Did this genetic testing in Trinidad and Tobago and found roughly a 25% incident rate of one of the mutations that leads to breast cancer. And she's using that data to help inform the government that we have an issue here, and let's make sure we have enough mammograms, enough MRIs to be able to help these families so we can get a handle on these cancers and prevent them before they even have a chance to occur. So it's a developed country, and it's a great example of how a young entrepreneur, medical student, and policy analyst is now trying to help inform her country and change the future of their health.
Oh, that's a fantastic, fantastic story. We think of ourselves as being in between policy, business, and international organizations. And one of the big initiatives in the world is, of course, around the Sustainable Development Goals. So has that been of any use to you, the SDGs? Do you say, gee, I could partner with the UN, or their emphasis on health is maybe an angle that I can link to disseminate our capabilities? Because I think part of the challenge of these institutions is to find partners in entrepreneurship, and something like the SDGs would potentially be a great vehicle for you, I would think.
I would love it. If you have contacts, I would love that. The challenge is that they tend to move too slow.
Okay.
And so I think where we found as a fast-growing company, you want to continue to move fast and partner with those at your same pace.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we've done, which is similar, is that we work with companies and self-insured employers like Visa and Salesforce and others who offer color to their employees. If there's a way that we can partner with international organizations to offer it to their nations and their organizations, that would be amazing.
Yeah, or the community that they're engendering, which
Exactly.
is other like-minded companies. Well, great. I think that was a fantastic start. I have many more questions, but we have a lot of people here. So let's see what's on your mind, and if there's ever a break, I'll jump back in. Would like to start us off?
I love seeing so many women in the audience, too.
Yeah,
I think we're like
absolutely.
70%.
No.
Am I guessing right?
Come on, don't be shy. Yeah.
From a policy point of view, you're gathering and color information that could be used by employers to describe the employer who's sponsoring this. Clearly, there are some HIPAA and other kinds of policy concerns. Can you talk a little bit of how you have built the culture in your organization to be aware of and constantly sort of keeping on the front edge of the sort of ethics and questions around the use of the data that you might have your hands on?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So, our customers' privacy is the most important thing that we can do, right? And so we want to be obsessive compulsive about protecting our customers and giving them information that they can use in a very positive way. And so, and just to clarify that point, I'm glad you raised it, that when employers pay for their employees that take the color test, they never get that information. The information that the customer gets is between themselves and the doctor. So the employer never gets it. What the employer will get is sort of generalized information that you have an employee base of 1,000 and 800 people have taken the color test. And so they get very generalized information, and that's fine. There are laws in place that do protect customers in addition. So there is GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. There's the ADA, there HIPAA, of course. And so we're regularly trained on ways to make sure that we have the right sort of tunnels and making sure that information doesn't cross across different organizations, who has access to different types of information, what kind of data is provisioned within the company, what type of information is sent to, there's this open database called ClinVar, and that information is sort of what customers will elect to donate for researchers to use and aggregate, and again, de-identified. So it's a long way of saying, like, it's very, very important. We would be out of business if we didn't make this a top priority, and it's something that we're really proud of. What's also interesting, our founders, having been software engineers and worked at Google and other places, that they are very, very well trained in data privacy. It's different than other companies that I think that are in the space that have grown up sort of in sort of a lab world.
So is there a plan to monetize the generic data that you guys are pursuing?
Not at this time. So the way we make money, we charge either $99 or $249 to the customer for the DNA sequencing, and we may have additional services down the road, but we don't resell that data.
In the back, Holly Gilman.
I'm just curious if you guys are doing any sort of either behavioral nudges or tracking when people are getting their genetic information and how that changes their health policy. So we're actually seeing the changes in people.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we don't do that yet, but it's something that we've talked about, that we would love to have sort of a phenotypic view of how people use this data and tracking them over time. So does it change their lifestyle? Does it change their behavior? If they had discovered that they have a BRCA1 or 2 mutation, did you get that mammogram? Did you follow up with your doctor? Did you get your family tested? Have you had that MRI? Like, what are the things that you're doing, and how in aggregate is that making a difference? We don't have that yet. We're still, I think, a little early. We've had the product out for a couple of years, but I think that's definitely a great direction for us to go in.
Please.
So I'm a first year student in SIPA, so my question is like in terms of the free speech in Twitter, so I would like to know whether does Twitter have regulations or to identify and respond if people make business through spreading fake news? Because the cases in China, like if you spread like a fake news and over 500 people tweet, it's considered to be a crime.
Interesting. So I can't speak for Twitter, but I do know that they take they have a couple of ways for the Twitter community to self-regulate. So if you see information that is abusive, if you see it's harmful, If you see that it violates their terms of service, that you can report it, and then they have different machine learning systems to be able to prioritize those reports. I don't think that they're in a position to police what could be conceived of as fake news. I think that might be a really, really hard job for anybody. So I know that they have some, rules and regulations in place, but being able to enforce it is probably another challenge that I'm probably not equipped to speak to.
Over here, and is there a question?
Yeah, thanks again for being here. You mentioned you were the board of a French company and you're working on for a startup. You have also worked with big tech companies like Google, Twitter, and so on. Can you talk a little bit about the involvement that you've had in startups, whether from a having started to start your own
Yeah.
at any point, or do you tend to take more of an advisory or investment role in any startups in general, or other companies or organizations?
Yeah, I love startups. I don't know. I wish I could say right now I have the guts to do a startup, maybe in a little bit. And I want to make sure I have a really good idea for it, like everybody else. But I do love startups. And so one of the things we were talking about earlier is that one of my other projects is something called #Angels. And it's an organization that maybe this is my startup. I co-founded it with 5 of my girlfriends, and we worked together at Twitter, and we were like, you know what, like, we love startups. We have collective experience across legal and finance and business development and product and so forth. And we can help these startups grow because we've been through this before many times. And we want to become better investors, and we also want to help more women get on the capitalization tables. And so let's kind of help each other and then bring more women in as we get stronger. So I've been doing that for the past 2 or 3 years, and collectively we've invested in, I think, about 50 different companies that range from 2 people with an idea to probably the biggest company that we've invested in is Coinbase, that is doing crypto trading, which I'm fascinated by. And so that kind of scratches that itch, I think, of being involved in startups. I love hearing the pitches. I love hearing the ideas and seeing the bets. And again, seeing sort of, very consistent properties of people who are curious, they're tenacious, they're global, and they're trying to solve a really important problem, whether it's in healthcare or crypto or media or in science at large.
Yeah. So let me extend an open invitation to come back and judge one of our future startup competitions. We'll give you plenty of notice, and you'll see a dozen or so finalists every year. So they're pretty interesting. I think there was a question here. Yes.
I'd like to comment. Do you also get involved in genetic counseling? Because that's a big part of, ethics problems.
Best question ever. I'm so glad you asked that, and I'm so mad at myself for not bringing it up. So as part of our color service, we offer complimentary genetic testing, and the color product itself is physician ordered. So those are 2 characteristics that I think are really important. First, because it's important for your doctor to be involved in your DNA and your whole makeup, and also get this information so she or he can help personalize your healthcare plan going forward. So we think that physician ordering is really important. And genetic counseling is one of probably the most popular feature that I hear consistently from our customers who are like, having that one person virtually connected to me help explain what this all means. Because it's not like we have biology, physics, genetics in high school or college, right? It's kind of it's not sort of mainstream yet, I think, as an industry and as a subject matter. And so it's really important for somebody to help digest and help you understand what that means, and also help you understand, if you have a mutation, it's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean you're going to get cancer. If you don't have a mutation, it doesn't mean that you're home free and you'll never get cancer. But it does mean that your risks may be different, and here are the things that you can do to stay healthy. Here are the things you can do for your family. And here are other support groups in your community. Or if you don't have a doctor, or if you don't know what to do next, this person can help guide you. And I've learned so much from our genetic counselors. I think it's such an important industry. It's a growing industry. And I do believe in 5 to 10 years that every child will be born and their DNA will be sequenced, and they'll have sort of this blueprint for life in terms of, of what to expect. I mean, it's kind of weird. You buy a car, you get this owner's manual, right? And all of a sudden at like 5,000 miles or 10,000 miles, it tells you, oh, service checkup, you need to do the following. We don't have that really for our bodies. Or there's something, your tire pressure is low, or these other things. You have all these different signals about what's going on. And so it's kind of weird that we don't do that for our own health and our own bodies. And the science is there. We just need to make it more affordable and accessible to people.
Mm-hmm. Although the interventions with these warnings are, each raise other challenges.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you do prophylactically?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think about those kinds of ethical questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we encourage and require a doctor's involvement. And we're not there to provide, here are the prophylactics that you should do. We try to provide a service that helps people be informed with their information and their data, and with the counsel of their medical and healthcare providers, that they can make the decisions that are right for them. Mm-hmm. And I do think too that there's still that demystification that needs to happen, that we're still in sort of this evolving. This still is relatively new. Just by show of hands, how many of you have had your DNA tested? Okay. And has anyone done 23andMe or Ancestry, looking at some of that stuff? Okay. So it's still pretty new. The other thing too that I should note is that, again, out of the 7 billion people on the planet, and millions of people, just like maybe 3 to 5 million people have had their DNA tested, it's largely a Caucasian population that have been tested. And so with researchers, as they're looking at this ClinVar database and others, the people that, the DNA that they're looking at is mostly of Caucasian descent, which is a challenge for many reasons. There are moral issues, there are societal issues, ethical issues, but also scientific issues, because if they're looking for cures for these diseases and cures for problems, it's going to be based on white people, which is not right. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we're talking to different communities and we're providing equal access, because there are different outcomes. So for example, with breast cancer, even though incident rates of breast cancer are much higher among white women, especially Ashkenazi women, an African American woman is 40% more likely to die from breast cancer. So it's really, really important, and it's one of our main initiatives of how do we bring equality to access and affordability and diversity in our community.
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very important. In the back.
You really do an impressive amount of work. How do you manage your time and your responsibilities across media, healthcare, and startups, and stay kind of relevant enough to date with a lot of really different things?
I don't have a social life. It's hard. But I think if you do what you love and you surround yourself with great people, you don't realize that you're working. And fortunately too, working at Color, I love my team. I've hired people way smarter than me that are really capable, and I know that while I'm gone, that they're doing amazing things. I also have chosen wisely in terms of the boss at the CEO at Color. When I told him I had this opportunity, I just joined the Time board last summer, and I was kind of scared to ask him. I was like, I know I'm already on the Vivendi board, and I'm really busy, but do you think it would be okay if I did the Time board too? And he was kind of quiet. He was like, totally, you should do that. So I had a really supportive, manager, and my kids are really supportive as well. And you can dial things up and dial things down, but choosing wisely the people that you're surrounded by. Don't do things just because you think it looks cool or because you think it's good on your resume. Because chances are, maybe it's good for your resume, but if you don't love it, life's too short. So I try to be really deliberate about the things that I do and where I work, so it feels fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. So one question, if I may, about sort of gender management of children and active life and so forth. Any comments around that? I think you mentioned you have 3 children. Now they're all at home still, right?
Yes, one's applying to college. If you can help her get into Columbia, that would be amazing.
Might be a little late. Hasn't she applied already?
She didn't apply.
Okay. So what's the secret of that complexity?
Well, especially with gender, the things that I've learned too, one of my favorite quotes is from Madeleine Albright, which is, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women.
Yep.
And so I feel like it's important to me to help other women because other women have helped me as well. My first boss, actually, when I was back in that fabled banking role, there were two women, two female vice presidents, and I was like, these are going to be my mentors, and they were not. One had me write her wedding invitations, and the other one, her only constructive advice to me was that I need to brush my hair more often. To this day, I have a little bit of a hair complex that, like, I couldn't believe someone professionally would tell me that. And it wasn't until when I moved to Silicon Valley that I was surrounded by these amazing women. I worked with Sheryl Sandberg and Marissa Mayer and Susan Wojcicki and Megan Smith, who became the first female CTO of the US government. And I was like, they were so great to me. They were so empowering to me. And they were, these idols to me. And they were friends and mentors. And I was like women stick together. And it was fantastic. And so I've learned how important that is. And, and small things. There's this great expression, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so it's really important for women that when you're at work, that you're seated at the table. I've seen a lot of women who will stand at the back of the room. Like, nope, you sit at the table. And so I feel like it's my responsibility, and I did this a lot at Twitter. In fact, I would see women sitting in the back, like, sit at the table. There's always going to be room for more women at the table. So there are small things like that, small gestures. And then there are bigger gestures, similar to what we talked about earlier, about how do you bring more women to the investing table. When I look at companies and startups to invest in, I ask them, how many women do you have on your executive team? How many women do you have on your founding team? How many women do you have as investors? And very often the answer is like too small. And so they're like, well, I don't know any women who would be interested in this role. I'm like, I can give you 10. And so, how do we bring more women to those tables and encourage them to do this? Because having more diversity at the table, we know this. We know that more diverse leadership organizations, more leadership teams, more diverse boards lead to better financial outcomes. So you make better decisions when you have a diverse group together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Question here.
So I'm very curious just to know if the genomics industry has noticed the biohacking movement, because genomics is pretty much leaving universities and the traditional labs into garages or kitchens or basements sometimes. And is this relevant somehow? Is that on the radar, or is it still too early for noticing that?
Yeah, and are you talking about like CRISPR and genetic editing and stuff like that?
Doing experimentation with genomics, not in formal labs, but in their houses or in informal places, or community labs. Like in Brooklyn, there's a community lab for genomic experimentation. Is that relevant for the industry already?
I think it's relevant. It's a great point. It still seems really early. I hear different news stories, but nothing super mainstream. It's probably inevitable. And again, like any technology, it can be used for good and not so good. So we will see, and that's why, and to your earlier point too, that regulations are hard because they're slow and they're dated, and it's hard for them to consider, these new industries and these new use cases. I remember when I went from Google to the White House, and I was like, okay, guys, we're going to get on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these things, a great way to connect with citizens. And our archives team were like, hold on, sister. The president's, what was it called? The Presidential Records Act, it was like 1955. It couldn't have possibly contemplated all these different platforms. And how do you preserve all the communication that the president has with citizens? And so something that I thought would take us like an hour to do, took us weeks to do, and making sure we had the right policy because those regulations were so old. And so similarly here, I don't know.
Well, they must be
I'll do some
busy
research.
now, I would say.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Please.
So the social impact that Twitter brings to the society is definitely a crisis, no matter it's an engaged conversation or asymmetric information sharing. I'm curious, like from an insight point of view, how important is being profitable to a company like Twitter? Because I'm asking because like when I work for social enterprises, I feel like it's something that these companies are always struggling with.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've had this conversation too at Color, and I've had it at Twitter as well. I think a lot of companies really tried to make this tough choice between growth and profitability, right? And so there's a good rationale for growth is that you want this winner take all, this first mover advantage. Everyone loves a growth story. You look at Wall Street, they're like, well, this company is growing 200% year over year, blah, blah, blah. And that seems really great. But then you look at the numbers, like, but they're losing a lot of money. I mean, Uber is probably a great example, right? For years it was growing, but it's like, spending billions and losing billions. And so, is that the right investment? We'll see. And then you look at sort of the lens of profitability. And so you basically want both. It's kind of like with my kids trying to decide, like, do you take all AP classes and get A's, or do you take the easier classes and like get A's? And what's sort of the right balance? You kind of want both, right? And so, so for color, we're really working on both the growth and profitability model. I think what's really unique about what we're doing versus a lot of the other labs is that because we're new and we're data-driven and we're engineering-driven, that we're able to take sort of the newest in software to kind of optimize the flow. So the cost is less, and so we can still grow and scale and try to reach as many people as possible, but to do it as profitably as possible. So it's tough, it's hard, but it's important.
Thank you. Sir, Nasser? Please, go ahead. Yeah.
I actually work for the UN, so we can.
Oh, great.
Almost sabbatical now in SIPA. You said the UN is too slow.
Uh-oh. This took an odd turn.
On the innovation, no, I agree with you totally. But you also work in the White House and the State Department. How do you compare also government to innovation in the private sector? I'm sure the different speed of innovation, but how can you also, if the goal isn't profit,
Yeah.
how do you incentivize for innovation in an organization like the United Nations with 193 member states pulling in different directions? And the second question is about being able to cover your company. Where does it come?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. So color comes from, I think our founders' hopes was to build something that was very positive, something optimistic, and also something that was around information and this whole sort of premise of get color on you. It sounded very aspirational and positive. It's also based on the Greek word chromosoma, so meaning colored bodies. And so there was sort of like a scientific, geeky twist to that as well. So that's where color came from. On your point around innovation, it's interesting. I do think that governments and institutions can be innovative, but they're built to have so many checks and balances, right? Like they're built to not be innovative. So the infrastructure kind of doesn't allow a lot of innovations to happen, but I've seen it happen. I saw it both with President Obama taking a lot of risks. So one of the first things he did, he sent this memorandum of understanding saying that this is going to be the most open and transparent and collaborative government, which kind of gave every single government agency sort of the cover to be able to try things. And when I went to the State Department, it was really interesting. Secretary Clinton did the same thing in terms of she created this Office of Innovation, was like just like solve problems in new clever ways. And so, for example, when the earthquake in Haiti happened in early 2010, I remember being at my daughter's basketball game. I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I knew a guy who was an entrepreneur who created a text messaging way for donations. And I called him up and I was like, Jimmy, is there any way that you can set up a way for people to help in America to donate for, I don't know, like $5 or $10 to the Red Cross? He's like, sure. He was in Pakistan at the time, so it was this total global effort. And so he set it up, and I emailed Cheryl Mills, who was the chief of staff at the time, and said, Cheryl, I don't know if the State Department would ever do this, or the White House would ever do this, but this guy set this program up. You just text Haiti to 90999. It'll donate, add $5 to $10 on your Verizon bill, AT&T, whatever, and we can donate all that money without any commission to the Red Cross. And she was like, great idea. Let me ask the secretary. So this is happening real time, in a couple of hours. Secretary Clinton was like, great idea, ship it. Couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I hope this isn't a mistake. And overnight, and I remember calling our friends at the White House, like, we just launched this thing. Do you guys want to talk about it? We're like, did you go through X, Y, and Z, protocol? We're like, no. They're like, well, it's on you. And I was like, okay. So overnight, we raised over $100,000. And then all of a sudden, everyone saw that this was a winner, and the Red Cross was super excited. Within a week, we raised $33 million. It was like one of the best text donation campaigns that happened because we had the air cover from Secretary Clinton and Cheryl Mills, who said, this is a great idea, it's moving fast, all the money goes straight to a good cause, we trust the Red Cross, we know it'll be used for the rebuilding of Haiti. And so, very long-winded way of saying, like, there is room for innovation, but you need to have the leadership supporting it. You need to make sure you have people who know what they're doing, and some guardrails and some policies as well that are modern and that recognize the tools of today.
what a wonderful conversation. Please join me in thanking Katie and welcoming her back again.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really